Greetings from Kansas City. This is Renee Benson at AB Renee KC, and you are listening to and watching the AB Live.
And hi, I'm your host, Tim Van Wert. I need to pay attention. I'm not used to having only the two of us here. And I'm your host. You are watching and listening to the AV Life.
It's you and I
gotta
Tim.
really, yeah, I know. I'm like, wait a minute. There's got to be somebody else, right? Oh, here he
wait,
is.
someone just popped in.
This
Here.
is what it is. Oh, look at this. And he's mobile. He's in his car. James King, welcome as we have just started recording tonight. So you can introduce yourself. There you go, sir.
There. Thank you. James King, writer for the Higher Ed Digital Magazine, IT and AV column, TEPMA board member, co-host of Ask the Programmer. You know, I'm everywhere. You can tell.
Yeah. Yes, you truly are. And yeah, you and now you're in your car. Last time you were at least out in the soccer field, but I'm guessing
it's 114 outside. I think I'm going to sit in the car this time.
Yeah, you could sit
Wow.
there. Yeah, we're in the about almost 100 degrees here in Jersey as well today. And you know, what would an episode of the AV Life be without talking about the weather? So
yeah.
But yeah, we're in the middle of a heat wave here in the Northeast. So it's but even down here in my basement, it's still a little stuffy. So usually this is where I go to get the reprieve from the heat.
Nice. Yeah, we actually had a problem with our air, but it seems to be working now, which is nice.
And those girls,
well, that's good.
Soccer in 114 Vegas heat.
Yep.
Oh boy.
I have to say, this would not happen in New Jersey. I know her team in New Jersey would half the players, if none of them would show up. The first time I was out here with them, a really hot one, I went to my daughter. I'm like, "Are you sure you want to go?" And she's like, "Yeah." I got here and there was 12 other girls from her team here, and this is all like not even before the season. This is all coaches volunteered right now. This is on his own time, not season, so it's not even mandatory to be out here right now. So see, he found a dedicated team.
Well, that's good. I mean, I'm guessing when you play out in Vegas and things like that, you know, you just get used to that sort of weather, and you know, you kind of play through it.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, and we have two really awesome guests with us tonight as well. As we've been stating on higheredav.com, this month of July is mental health month. And we have brought in two wonderful guests, one who is fast becoming a very big regular here on the AV Life. We welcome back Tammy. Hey, Tammy, how are you?
I'm good, guys. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great and terrific.
Thanks for those accolades, by the way. Awesome and you know, wonderful. I'll take that any day.
Well,
So.
Rockstar.
Rockstar, AV Rockstar. There you go.
Oh,
yes.
yeah. I still consider myself more like a superstar than a rock star, but yeah, thanks so much. Should I give who I am, what I do?
Yes,
Tammy
please.
extraordinaire, I guess. Yeah, so Tammy Fuqua with QSYS. Now QSYS, not QSC. I'm with QSYS, that side of it, because we kind of did a little split recently. So QSYS, and I'm the developer partner manager for the Alliance and Ecosystem team. So I'm out recruiting third-party developers to do plugins. So that's my job. And then on the side, I am the Avixa Women's Council co-chair. So, and I'm very happy to be here talking about mental health. So.
Yeah, we know it's a topic you know, that you're very passionate about, and admittedly, I'm sorry I didn't invite you right off the bat, and you asked me to come on, and I was like, oh, of course. So like, you know, after we had our conversation like a month or so ago in wake after one of the shootings, you know, we talked about that sort of things, and So this has been a topic that has been on the regular for us, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it.
Right.
But it's a topic just much as security that we need to keep talking about. So
Yeah, absolutely. And no worries about the invite, Tim. I like inviting myself places. So
hey, I'm all in for that, because I can only process so much, and eventually things like drop off to the wayside. So thank you for chiming in on that. And I would then also now like to welcome Adrienne O'Neal, who is a nurse practitioner. And I'm going to say you're our SME for tonight, subject matter expert. So, and coming very highly from Renee, as most siblings do. So we are one big family here on the AV Life. So, Adrienne, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit to our listening audience, and
Okay.
that way they know who you are.
I am Adrienne O'Neal, as he stated. I am a nurse practitioner. I'm certified in family medicine, but I have dealt with mental health a lot in my career as a nurse practitioner and as a nurse. Before I became a nurse practitioner, I have worked at a couple different adolescent psychiatric facilities, different levels of intensity. One was a little bit more intense than others, than the other one. I have worked in a nursing home Alzheimer/dementia unit, which is a whole other world of mental health. As a nurse practitioner, I've done medication management for depression, anxiety, like common mental health disorders. Some of the bigger ones, like schizophrenia, I refer on to psychiatrists because that's just above my level of expertise. But I've worked a lot in mental health over the years, and I really do like it. I never thought I would like working with mental health patients, but I do. I really do. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, we are very happy to have you on board. That was perfect. It was a great intro for yourself. And yeah, it's so I know during like the 2 years of COVID, we've all gone through our moments of things, and we all had our when you're sitting at home with your family, that's there's, and not being, we're social people by design. Yeah, as Renee is pointing it to herself. um and so we all had to deal with whatever we had going on, and now we're all reacclimating. So we want to take this, like I said, this month of July and mental health awareness, to be able to kind of just talk about it in general, and to talk about some things to keep an eye out for, like what it might be, just to have some clarity for everybody to understand, because the topic of mental health has come up many times over the course of the last 6 months to 2 years.
Right.
So it's a very important topic for all of us. And now that if from a higher ed perspective, we're getting back to normal in our universities and colleges and so forth. So, we've gone from 2 years of, we're kind of doing things, to now, like, personally, we ramped it up and we are back full force with our technology. And that's changed the way I've had to manage my time and my mental health, and things like that. So excuse me. And so I guess the first thing, like, what would be a, I could throw this out to the group, and then Adrienne, if you want to fill in the blanks, what is mental health? We'll throw it out to the group here. How would we define this? I know, yeah,
It's even hard for me to define it. I mean, I just went, your mental health is how you take care of yourself and how you are doing in your daily life. And just, I mean, it's very hard for me to define exactly what is mental health, but it's not always just, oh, put a smile on your face and be happy, you know, because that's not always what it is.
Right.
If anyone else has any different ideas, I mean, going into like the physiology of mental health, like depression, anxiety, those things are very real. It's not like 30 years ago or 10 years ago, people were like, oh, just snap out of it, because you can't. There really is a chemical imbalance, you know, just like someone has diabetes, you can't say, just stop drinking pop and your diabetes will go away. It's not that simple. You can't just smile and your depression goes away. It goes deeper than that.
Yeah, I mean, depression isn't just like I'm feeling sad today. It's deeper than, like you're saying, it's deeper. It's more chemical, and I think a lot of us go through that period of like being depressed, and how you work through it and deal with it is probably the most important part of depression and anxiety. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely other forms of mental health that need to be worked through, but I feel like all of us go through the depression and anxiety of everyday life. That's just part of life, but then there's some that's even deeper than that, you know, that requires maybe seeing someone to give that help to get through those periods of depression and anxiety.
Well, I think that's why it's become so prevalent now because of the pandemic, where you know, the kids who are used to being social and in the classroom every day are stuck at home. And you know, I know there's people that even during the pandemic were still wanting to get out and go work instead of being at home, and you didn't have a choice. So when you're doing something that maybe you don't want to, or you didn't pick to do that, and then you're fighting with your own demons. I think it was what Aaron Peterson, who was still going in and like sitting in the warehouse just so he could get out of his office and work, right? He was still doing that to get out of the house and that sort of thing. But when you're forced into doing things for such a long period of time, it weighs on you, you know, it weighs on you. And you know, you're getting food at your house, you're getting your groceries at your house, you're not able to I mean, other than going out for a walk, we weren't really able to leave, you know, and it's enough to drive anybody kind of a little out of their mind.
Isolation. People don't realize the effect of social isolation, because
yeah, like you know, I'm a social butterfly. Like we still had Taco Tuesdays during the pandemic and went outside to somebody's house and we'd sit outside and do Taco Tuesday and did what we could, because it's like we couldn't stand, our group of friends couldn't stand not being together. It's probably the only
well, and I will say there's a little bit of a flip side to that, because I still went into campus during the pandemic. I was there with the exception of maybe I'd say of over 18 months, 1 month total time of being home. But I saw the same 10 people through those 18 months. When you're going to a campus that's completely deserted, except for a few faculty members and then the regular people that you see, and we're doing the same thing day in and day out, like that's just remote isolation. I shouldn't laugh, but it's the same but different at the same time.
Well,
so
but you're still affected by it because you're not seeing the students on campus. You're not seeing the regular activity and energy of a normal campus. You're seeing an empty campus except for a very small amount of people. That's still an effect on you. You know, and I think that and I might be jumping ahead on some thoughts here, but like I think the stigma on mental health is probably the biggest part of it. Like, yeah, I can feel depressed, but like for me, I've learned how to work through depression, but for other people, maybe they don't know who to talk to about it, or who, you know, how to work through those feelings. So it's kind of like, I think that that's the part that, you know, it's great that we're having this conversation, because someone who maybe normally would not know who to reach to may watch this and go like, hey, I actually can talk about mental health, which is something I think, you know, as little as 5 years ago was even hard to talk about. Or I remember when I was doing my undergrad work, which I didn't mention my undergrad work was all in mental health and administration. And I remember when I told a family member I wanted to do counseling and therapy, their first response was, why do you want to work with all those crazy people? So it was like, I could see in the amount of time that from doing my undergrad to now, there has been some change, but boy, there still needs to be a lot done.
Yeah. Now, Adrienne, have you, over the course of, have you seen an uptick like in clients and things like that? Like,
huge. So, you want to talk about just the pandemic. So at that time, during the pandemic, I worked as a nurse per diem. Basically what that means is it's as needed. But like the nursing home I worked at needed help a lot. So I was able to basically set my own schedule, which was great. And my husband was considered an essential worker. So he would go to work. So I had all the kids home with me. And when I say all the kids, I had 4 kids. And my youngest at the time of lockdowns, let's see, would have been March, was 6 months old. So I had a 6-month-old, a 1.5 old, and then 2 in school that I was now having to school from home, which was not easy with 2 infants, one of them being a newborn. And then on evenings or on the weekends when my husband wasn't at work, I would go to work. And that was it was nice because I'm like, oh, I get to get out. And my coworkers were all like, oh, we get to get out too, which was nice. But what was so sad to me, and I think Renee might remember this because I would text it in our family group chat, but like the old people, the people in the nursing home didn't have contact with their family for years. It was so sad to have, because they were ostracized to their rooms. The only residents that were allowed out of their rooms were ones that were not able to like feed themselves at mealtime. So they would go to the dining room and be distanced. We would have a couple staff members, going around to help feed those people. The ones that were able to feed themselves stayed in their rooms. Their tray was brought to them. Their tray was picked up. When we would, as workers, would go in, we would have our N95s, our face shields. We had, our hair was covered. We had gowns. Like, it was like coming in a spacesuit every single room. And like, my residents used to like me because they probably still would if I went there, but they used to like me because I used to actually, like, rather than go sit at the nurse's desk and be bored, sometimes when I had some downtime, I would go sit with the residents. I would ask them. This one really loved gardening before she went to the nursing home. So I'd ask her, help me start a garden. And so we would chat. But when the pandemic hit, we couldn't do that. We were not allowed to be in the rooms for an extended period of time. It was basically get in, do your cares, get out. Now I broke those rules, and I think I can say that safely because I don't work there anymore. But I used to still go hang out with them, especially on night shift because there was less administration at night. But it was just so sad. Like, so the mental health of our residents skyrocketed because we did have some family members that would come every single day to see their mom or their grandma, and we had great families. We had some that didn't, but even trying to do window visits with our Alzheimer's patients, our dementia patients, they don't understand. It would almost upset them more because they couldn't touch them. They couldn't hug them. Like, why am I looking at you through this window? I don't understand why you can't come in. So I saw it there. And then even recently, I still see an uptick. My most recent position that I have been doing medication management for, depression, anxiety, a therapist office, they're still booked so far out because people are still coming in. They're like, I'm still struggling with this, or, luckily I've lived in a couple states, or maybe I shouldn't say luckily, but South Dakota and Wyoming didn't do much for shutdown. The school districts did, but like out in public, not so much. But like the kids that were struggling from the lack of contact, that really saw an uptick. I have seen an uptick of everything, and it's still going on. It hasn't, just because we're getting back to normal, it hasn't come back down because it just, like, it's a snowball. It just kept going.
Mhm.
Which is sad, because it's kind of like we're getting to a better spot, right? With, well, maybe not now with COVID coming back around, but it seems like maybe things should be alleviated a little bit off of, like they can go visit grandma now, right? They can, when somebody's in the hospital, have a baby, your husband can come in now and be in the room, and whereas some of that stuff stopped during the pandemic. But goes to show that, I mean, there's not a cure, right, for mental illness. There's not, hey,
Mhm.
the masks are off, we're all better now. It just didn't happen that way. And I think that's what a lot of people,
Mhm.
don't understand and struggle with. It's interesting you say that you're still seeing an uptick, and it makes me sad, but
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
And access to mental health care is not easy. I don't know. I know LA might be different. Kansas City might be different, but around me, where it's pretty rural, I literally, the closest psychiatrist to me is an hour and a half away. He's booking out 10 to 12 months. The next available psychiatrist is an additional hour and a half away. So within like a 3-hour radius of where I'm living, there's 2 psychiatrists who are booked out months and months and months. So, it helps that there's nurse practitioners, there's family physicians, there's, other people that are able to help with that care gap. But when you're talking about mental health, it's not just COVID, depression, pandemic issues. There is, real schizophrenia, bipolar, like all those big things that people, the crazy people, quote unquote. And a lot of times only psychiatrists have the expertise to work with them in depth. And 2 psychiatrists in a 3-hour radius from me, that is not okay. That is not okay.
And I can only imagine that those sort of therapies are best done in person and not over like Zoom calls and stuff
Yep,
like that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I have seen several patients over Zoom or telehealth, whatever, but it's hard to know how things are really going, because it's really easy for someone to put on a smile and say, yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing better. You're helping me. But when you see them in person, their body language might tell a different story than what you can see on Zoom. And
Mhm.
it makes things hard.
Yeah.
that would be
So
hard.
yeah. So I have ADHD, and I also go to see my therapist about that too. So I've been doing a lot of telehealth just because it's just easier with my schedule and things like that. But I used to see him regularly in person, and yeah, I agree. There is a 100% difference between that time on the phone, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
being able to actually sit down and talk to him is always a plus. So
Yeah. I know when I was doing a lot of my internships, was a couple of my professors were like, you really should go to counseling or therapy just to know the process, right? Plus you might have issues that you want to work through, so you're not transferring it to someone else. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go to therapy. And then I didn't realize until I started going, like, how beneficial it was. It should have been a no-brainer that, yeah, it would be beneficial, right? But
mhm,
I think what people don't realize about therapy is it's a good way to have someone to talk to that's very impartial, as far as, your friends are going to tell you, positive things, or maybe they'll side on your side, because you're telling them, hey, my boyfriend, whatever. And then they're like, oh yeah, it's definitely you. Well, when you go to a therapist, they're going to be totally impartial. They're going to listen to what you're talking about and give you feedback that maybe it's not exactly what you want to hear, but it's like it will help you through processes that will in the long run benefit you, and help with relationships, and help maybe with behaviors that you're having that maybe you're not realizing that is detrimental, or give you ideas to work through, the depression or anxiety, or, whatever other issue. But I just find that if people can stop thinking of therapy as something that you go to only when it's, you know, it's hey, going back to the, you're crazy comment, but like if people think that, then they're not going to go. But really what therapy is a way of just working through these mental health problems that you might be experiencing.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess I'm going. I admit I have a list of questions here, so it actually kind of worked out that the next bullet, it's what do I do if the support doesn't help? So let's say you started going to therapy and you started like talking to somebody, but or like they put you on medication, but it doesn't seem to be doing what you needed to do. Like, what's the next step? I mean, is it?
So that's the hard thing about mental health disorders is it's not like I fell off my bike, broke my leg, I know I need a cast and that will fix it. You don't go in and say, I'm depressed, give me Lexapro, I'm going to be cured. Sometimes it takes a combination of different modalities, whether that be, and it kind of depends on where stuff stems from. Are you depressed because you are having isolation from COVID and that's bothering you? Or are you having some problems because you were abused as a kid and now you're having some PTSD that's rearing its ugly head in your daily life and you don't know how to deal with it? It just kind of depends where the stem of it comes from. If that's what it is, if you have past traumas, there's other things like EMDR treatment or therapy. There's what is it called? CBT therapy. There's so many different modalities. So I always tell people, especially patients that I would see, a lot of times people like to go to a therapist first to see if talking through things and those things help. And sometimes it doesn't. And, people would come to me and I would say, if you don't mesh with this therapist, you need to find another one. It's okay to find somebody else because somebody will be there. You have to be able to mesh with them and trust them. And because if you don't trust someone, you're not going to listen to their advice. You're not going to hear what they have to say. So that's what I would say to people as far as going to therapy, trying different things, to help their trauma or whatever it is that they're experiencing. As far as medications go, there are so many different kinds of medications for depression and anxiety and others as well that everybody should be able to find something, and it's not, sometimes it takes trial and error. This one might not work, but this one will, and they do have genetic tests out nowadays that I have actually referred for some of my patients that have been on 2 or 3 different medications and it doesn't work for them. So they do a genetic, like a cheek swab, and then the DNA report is ran and it can help figure out exactly what medication will work with that person's DNA. And so that is really cool that we're able to do that now because it helps get to a thing faster, and I always tell people you have to give it, it's not going to be a one and done. Like, even if I chose the very perfect medication for you and you started it, it's going to take 6 weeks to kick into your system fully. That's the trouble with mental health medications too, is it takes a little bit for them to kick in. It's not like an antibiotic where you feel it in 24 hours, so it's just kind of persevering through that initial lull, and if after a couple months you're like, what, this medication really is not working, then we need to try something new. And that's totally fine. But I always encourage patients, let's try something new until we get the right thing. We're not going to fail. We don't want to fail you. We don't want you to feel miserable in your daily life, because if you're miserable, your family's miserable, your work is going to suffer, everything else is going to suffer right along with you. So we want to get everything better. And sometimes it takes a while. So what I say to people is just give it some time and try other things.
So I was going to ask James, since he just went through such a major life change when your wife and your kids and moving everybody, from Jersey to Vegas and friends and soccer and all the things that you're like, how are you keeping up with keeping everybody happy and I would think that I mean, as a child, I moved several times and I remember thinking how tough that was. And I've been thinking about you guys, but it sounds like your girls are involved in soccer and things are okay. So how do you-
I wouldn't go as far as say things are okay and peachy keen, and that is putting frost or makeup on a pig type deal. Like there's it is hard. I mean it's an adjustment as we know. So my youngest daughter has stayed with soccer, so she has that outlet. My oldest decided she was going to take a break and just maybe pick it back up in middle school. So really, she doesn't have that outlet of getting out and playing with friends. So it's having open, frank discussion. It's not going, "How are you?" and they replying, "Oh, good," and leaving it at that. It's getting into, "What are you doing today? What did you have for lunch? Did you talk to your friends from back from Jersey? Did you watch any TV? Like, did you do this? Like getting into that and showing one that you're there to support and care, and as well as just listening to them. And because a lot of times there's a lot said that is not actually spoken. You can it was mentioned, the body language. Picking up the body language is always good. So definitely watching the girls and my wife and all that stuff, making sure that they are saying. And again, we know, they're not going to be happy. Like my oldest is not happy right now because she left all her friends back in New Jersey. But once school sets up, I know her. She's the type of person who can make friends easily. So I feel she's going to make friends and build that connection. But it's really making sure she gets through that until those connections are made.
Well, I think that you hit what like is one of the most important parts is like just keeping that communication open. And I think that um, after we had this last discussion together about mental health, it was right after Uvalde happened, and I started like taking note of like how many of these young people are the active shooters in some of these instances, and a lot of it has to do with like there's just not enough communication. I mean, like our young people are the most connected they've ever been in any lifetime here, any generation, yet the most alone or the most isolated because they're just on a phone, right? Or they're so involved in, things that um maybe don't allow them to connect with other people. And I think like James, I think that that's really admirable that you're really like, and I mean, as a parent, I'm sure you would be, but like being involved by asking questions and showing that you care about their well-being. That's a huge part, I think, of mental health is being able to connect with that person and allowing them to know that they can trust you enough to tell you when there is something wrong.
So that I'll admit that didn't happen overnight. I didn't become a parent and be like, okay, this is how I'm acting. And like I used to accept that when I would ask girls, how were your day? Oh, fine. And we moved on with the day. But it's actually listening to a lot of discussion. And I really think the biggest eye awakener for me was listening. And I mentioned this in the last podcast we had when we talked about my article, but listening to the parents of Katie Myers, who was the Sanford goalkeeper. They, for those who are unaware, she was the Sanford goalkeeper. They just won their conference, should have been on the top of the life, like, living life to the fullest. She did have some bad comments on social media and stuff, had some bad PR, because really the game went into overtime and went into kicks by what I'm hearing. And basically, she was vital to their winning that game. So, it really should have pumped her up. Her parents really went into depth. Like they had open communication, communicating with her. And a lot of people say, oh, there's a lot of red flags if they don't pick up, like when you're talking to your friends and they start canceling a lot of plans, that's a red flag. Or, they change their diet or change this. Katie, according to parents and stuff, Katie had none of that, none of those red flags. For a fact, the day that it happened, she died of suicide. The day it happened, she was talking that morning, talking to her parents, planning to buy plane tickets to fly home. And so, like a lot of these people who are thinking about it, they're canceling their trips or canceling that. So it's learning to ask the right questions. It's not just, talking and taking the surface value, but actually listening and following through. And like I said, that was a very painful one to listen to, because I mean, I am a father of 2 daughters, and to see a person at the prime of their life who should be really on top of the world almost, feel their out was that solution when there were loved ones there and were solutions there to help her, really took me back. And like they were saying is Katie's mother found out, like, most our brains aren't developed until we're 22, but we're putting these kids in college and even younger kids in adult situations almost, and expecting them to make choices where they're not just physically not capable of making those choices, especially in college. I know we're talking about more than just that, but like college, there is these kids want to be independent, but now they're still dealing with a unadult brain in adult situations and trying to emotionally handle them without, like, oh, if I go to my parents, am I a failure? Which I don't think any parents think their kid coming to them is a failure, but it's just that whole stigma that's out there in society.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very much about that stigma. I think that's, trying to get us as a nation kind of past that. And I think that's, it's a very real thing that we all are impacted on at some level, like, whether we choose to see it or not. Just as like for Adrienne, as for somebody who may recognize that somebody is having, without them diagnosing what they may have, but they recognize that they're not their usual selves or they're not well. What are some tips to maybe for someone to approach that person to help, to try to guide them toward the help that they may need?
It's, like James had said, trying to keep an open dialogue with not just your kids, but like anybody in your life, that's important to try to say, I think the best thing to do is don't approach the person as confrontational, but you could say something like, I've noticed you seem sad, or I noticed that your car's really, or, something silly like, why is your car so messy? You keep it so clean usually. It's little things like that that people can pick up on. People's organizational skills go bad, or people stop working out when they normally were a good workout person. It's just, and I think it also depends on how close your relationship with that person is too. Like one of my clients that I saw probably 3 months ago or so, I was like, oh, what brings you in today? He's like, my roommate made my appointment for me. And the roommate was there with him. And it was, this guy was, I don't even know how to describe him. He was not well, and the roommate brought him in and she said, he's not himself. He would not make an appointment himself. So I made it for him and I made him come see you. And, we started his treatment plan. And, so even going as far as doing something like that, like, I care for you, I'm talking to you, something's not right, we're going to seek help. Because I would rather have somebody get mad at me for forcing them to go see a doctor than me living with regret that that person felt like they couldn't do this life anymore or something like that.
Mhm.
So that, I mean, I don't know if that helps to answer, but just do anything, doing anything to reach out to someone you think might be struggling is better than doing nothing. And even if they're not struggling, and maybe they just are extra stressed out for whatever reason and they withdrew and they didn't mean to, but they're not really depressed or whatever or struggling, just having someone reach out and that probably would be like, make them feel good, like, oh, that person really does care, okay, that makes them feel better. Just, I think it's just good to be in a habit of checking in on people, whether you think they're struggling or not, and if they are, then do a little bit extra.
I,
And
I agree with that because a real shocker, like after my article post, and I wasn't struggling. I posted just that was the theme. It was something that needed to be said. It was challenged. I'm saying like I'm in a good place. I had many people reach out, and it felt nice that hey, there are people out there who care. And actually, what's funny is one of the people who reached out didn't even read my article, didn't even know what was going on. So he's like, "You were just on my mind." So I reached out to see how things were going, knowing that I just moved and stuff. So yes, having even if you're not sure someone's struggling, just reaching out, I think, can really lift someone who's struggling.
mhm. And it makes people feel good even if they're not struggling. It makes them feel good, like, oh, so and so was thinking about me, that felt good. And I think in the world of mental health, just talking about it, that alone is what's going to help get rid of the stigma or decrease it a little bit. Because bring it up, I didn't grow up with parents who were like, tell me how you're feeling. It was like, oh, things are good, okay. Nobody talked about their feelings. And so I don't know if it was that made me parent a little bit differently, or the fact that I was a nurse with kids in a psychiatric facility. Maybe it was a combination of them both, but I check in with my kids a lot. And I try, I mean, I still get mad, I'm a parent or whatever, I get mad, but I try really hard not to get angry at them when they're showing their emotions. Because it's just like you had a big move this year. I moved 9 hours away from everything I know about a year and a half ago. And my oldest was 13 at the time, and she did not take that well. She struggled, and it was February. And so she had the last couple months of the school year, and she was mad at me. She was angry at me. Like, she hardly it was bad. My husband had to pull her aside multiple times and talk to her, like, and I finally was like, I know you're mad. I understand, but you'll see why I did this, why we made this move, in the future. You'll understand. And I told her, you can be mad at me all you want. I let her live in those feelings. And I'm like, but what's not okay is to talk to me the way you do, or to treat me the way you do. But you are able to have those feelings. That's fine. And I even do that with my toddlers. They get mad and they'll scream and push, and I'll say, I know you're mad, but you don't push. You can't. And so letting people feel their feelings, I think, helps them feel more heard. And
Mhm.
I think that will help with their mental health, because then they're not having to shove their feelings down and save it for a different day. And that's, my parents, grandparents generation, that's what everybody did, is they didn't talk about their feelings, but talking about your feelings.
Amy's daughter has a really great Aunt May who checks in on her often too.
Yeah.
Man.
I'm the same way. It's to almost not allow someone to have their feeling, you're dismissing them. Yes, you can be angry. Yes, you can be sad. Yes, you can be happy, all that stuff. But yes, your actions are different. You have to be respectful, but you're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to be mad. But yeah, so like you say, you should not be hitting people or doing things like that.
Well, I think Tim and I have had a couple of instances over the last
I gotta go, guys. I'll talk to you
Well,
later.
thank you
Bye,
thank you
James.
very much, James.
Yeah.
Good seeing you,
Yeah.
James.
Couple of
See you.
instances
Good
where
seeing you.
people we were checking in on that we were worried about,
Mhm.
right? A couple of times, even at InfoComm, I talked to you about one, and I'm like, I just worry about it. I just want to make sure he or she is okay, and
Mhm.
think that's in human nature. But I think as long as we continue to do that for those that we think might be struggling, approach it like Adrienne said, and like, I see you've been distant. I see you look sad or what have you. And I think, yeah, even if this touches just one person going, hey, you know what, if you want to go talk to somebody, that's okay. It doesn't make you crazy, right? I mean, a lot of people talk to people and nobody ever knows, right? Nobody has to know. It's private but
When I talk to my patients or clients that I see, I always tell them nobody would ever say anything if you were seeking treatment because your blood pressure was high or if you're diabetic. I'm like, why treat this differently? And and some people don't think about it like that. So when I tell them, I'm like, this is no different than you seeking help for a broken leg or whatever it may be. They're like, oh,
that's a
okay,
good
that
way.
makes sense.
Yeah, because it's an illness.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, like if you had cancer, you wouldn't just go home and like deal with it on your own. You would seek a professional to help you get through it. So mental illnesses should be treated the same way.
And it's such a different world now than when we grew up, right? I mean, and now I can go to my room and be mad, and I can post it all, and I can do all these things that I couldn't do when I was grounded. I went to my room and I had nobody. I had no phone. There was no internet, and you dealt with it and you moved on. But now it's like you're all up in your feelings, and you can text and go live or do all the things that aren't necessarily 100% healthy for you when you're in that situation. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and when we were talking about reaching out to people when you think that there's something wrong or that you have this, feeling that there's something wrong. I think, and this might sound, a little Pollyanna-ish when I say it, but I think simple acts of kindness to even, strangers could make a difference in someone's life. Every day when I am out and about, I'm always asking people, how's your day going? And, how are things, even if they're strangers, that might have made a difference in someone's life just by asking them how they're doing. And I just remember, during COVID, when everybody had a mask on, you could never see anyone's emotion. You didn't know if they were smiling. You didn't know if they were upset. And I even noticed that a lot of people didn't even make eye contact. I mean, I'm a person that makes eye contact with people. They probably think it's creepy, but I just do. So I just noticed that became less and less during COVID because everyone was so focused on like what they needed to get done or what was happening. But I think that, just smiling at someone can even make a difference with someone who feels
Mhm.
lonely or feels depressed. Those are important things to remember, is to treat everybody with kindness because you don't know what they're going through.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As I'll say that, but this is how my brain works. For if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, I'm reminded of the movie Evan Almighty, and our esteemed actor Morgan Freeman plays God, and one of the lines at the end is like, "How do you change the world with one single act of random kindness?" ARK. And for those of you who don't know, Steve Carell's character goes through this whole thing being like Noah and building the ark, and that's the acronym for ARK. So yeah. So this is how my brain was, just to give you some insight as to what my brain was doing during that part of the conversation. And that's something we've talked about many times here on the podcast, is about just being kind. And that's how we get through this, Then I could say that there were probably times when I was growing up that, kids could be not so kind. So I think kids are better about it. And I will say, kids now, especially because of COVID and the minimal amount of social time that they got. And because my son is going to be in second grade in the fall, so his class in particular, they were all yearning for that social aspect. So they're all inclusive of all the kids in their class, which is amazing. And it warms your heart as a parent to see that sort of stuff happening.
That's
So
great.
there's hope for the future.
Wow, that's awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just like a lot of other issues, like, in the past that we say a lot of things have changed, when we look at the way we look at LGBTQ now, I mean, so different than when I was growing up. I mean, I think mental health would be like one of those things where, maybe 10, hopefully less time than this, but let's say 10 years from now, we won't think of that as a stigma. We'll think of it as, you're brave for going and looking for help when you need it, or you know, just being able to work through the different mental health issues and coming out on the other side of it, or or learning how to work with it. That won't be so much of a stigma anymore, that I could say, yeah, I'm really depressed and I need some help. Or being able to share with somebody that's going through, maybe they're bipolar, being able to say, yeah, I'm bipolar too, and let me share with you what I've experienced. Maybe it could help you. I mean, I would like to see that we can get to a place where being able to talk about those things are not like, oh my gosh, what, they have bipolar? Wow, I want to be able to say, just like anything else, it's something that could be worked with. So
I agree.
Mhm. Well, I think this is a absolutely wonderful conversation that we just had tonight. So I think this is a good place for us to kind of wrap things up. Any parting thoughts for our listening audience, Adrienne? Not to put you on the, put the spotlight right on you, but just a general comment of, kind of wrapping up everything tonight.
The biggest thing is it's okay to seek help. It's okay to not be okay. And so, when you're feeling not okay, just reach out to somebody, your parent, a friend, a sibling, whoever you feel comfortable talking to. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to anyone because you don't have any social support, find a provider that you trust, whether it be a therapist, a family doctor. There's someone somewhere that will help you get you in the right direction. So don't be afraid to seek help if you need it.
And through your church too. I mean, I know we've got some counseling options through our church that they offer. And that way, if you don't have insurance or money is a factor, a lot of churches, at least in my area, will
That's
assist.
a really good place to start too. I didn't think about a church, but that's a very good place. Every single community in America has a church, so there's somewhere, and most of the time those people will welcome you with open arms to get your refuge, get your help. So that's a good, very good spot.
That fellowship that can be found at church sometimes is life-saving.
Priceless.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that is perfect. Thank you very much for wrapping that up. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us again tonight.
Thanks.
I think
Give me a t-shirt.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
I
I
have
think,
just my Blondie shirt on tonight because I was on the run.
We're trying to work out getting AV Life stuff out there for people, for our fan base to buy. We're working on those details as we speak. So hopefully you'll see a little shop with AV Life apparel and such soon. I actually have to get back and talk to Joe about that again. So maybe at the end of the summer.
What? That Joe.
Yeah.
I'll go tell him you better get me a shirt.
Yeah, he's going out to do his keynote stuff tonight. So, or whatever it is tonight.
Yeah.
Vendor management. Yes. And Adrienne, thank you so much for joining us as well tonight. Renee, pleasure as always.
Yes, thanks for putting this together. It was very important. Adrienne, thanks for coming.
Thanks for
It
having
was-
us.
Let us
Thanks for tackling this subject. And I'll even just throw out there, if there's anyone in AV that needs someone to talk to, my doors are always open.
Yeah, ditto that. Ditto that.
Yeah, yes, that we are all supportive for whoever needs it. You know, message, text message, DM, whatever it's got to be, you know, at least to get the conversation started. And if I don't know, I will find somebody who does. So
Absolutely.
we have our AV family and our AV tweeps. We will make it work for you. It also goes for anybody else who may be not AV as well. So if you just need somebody to talk to, or just need some direction, hit us up on Twitter and all the fun socials out there, and we'll get you what you need. So thank you all for listening, and until our next adventure.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.